What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and I gave you guys my breakdown of my biggest winners and losers for the offensive side of the ball. We're running it back now with the defensive side, and to be honest, I thought the defense was going to be the easier video to complete for this, I guess, but it feels like there's a lot less jobs up for grabs in terms of starting spots, and you start getting a little bit more into the weeds with depth players, key role players, having to do a ton of projection when it comes to guys in new schemes or rookies that may need to step up, or even just that emergency break the glass player for in the event that a starter goes down, right? So with that said, we're going to kick things off with the defensive line, trench play, and we're going to go defensive tackle first. And I would say the biggest winner of the offseason so far is Byron Cowart. Now, we picked him up from the Bears, and we know that he spent time with new defensive line coach Eric Washington, which gives him a leg up. He's already going to understand the scheme that he's looking to facilitate and how we want to attack things. Of course, that being meshed and blended with Steve Wilks and what he wants to do schematically versus how Aaron Glenn also wants us to play and what he's bringing over from Detroit. But ultimately, he gets a leg up over the competition because he knows the lingo, the verbiage, the expectations from the coach, and he can really act as that player coach type person on the field. But we also already heard about him potentially leading the job when it comes to starting next to Quinnen Williams after having a above average display so far during the offseason, right? Days with multiple pressures, sack here or there, but we also talked about the fact when he signed, and just as we got hints throughout the offseason of his progress, this is a guy where the needle was pointing up, right? I think from an efficiency standpoint, he's done well with what he's been asked to do, and he's the rare player on our squad that has actually been able to perform adequately to above average when it comes to the run game and rushing the passer. So with that in and of itself, he's separating himself from the pack, which is good news. We wanted a veteran to step up. He's on an extremely cheap contract, so you feel really, really good about really anything you can squeeze out of him as long as it's at least league average play to help Quinnen Williams out. But he has the body type to hold up with everything that you would want in addition to that. So this is a guy that could end up fortifying his role by the time training camp kicks around if he can keep the physicality up. And considering that we looked to hire a lot of or we signed a lot of run-oriented guys as well when it just comes to that DT nose tackle type spot, Jay Tufele, Derek Nandi, for example, it makes sense why he would be able to encourage the staff to promote him as a starter here. Now, my loser is actually going to be Jay Tufele as well, and it's more so just because if you look at him in direct comparison to Derek Nadi, you can make the argument that they would potentially prefer to go with the veteran that's shown that he can still get the job done at his age, even though we have been getting rid of the guys over 30, etc. But with Jay Tufele and the body archetype that he has, he really should be playing nose tackle, but is essentially moonlighting as a gap penetrator that just so happens to handle double teams, right? I think when you look at him from a statistical, analytics base, you can make an argument that there's some upside there with his ability to win in run defense. But, and to be fair, that's the role that you're expecting him to play, right? But again, he's going to be facing Derek Nadi, and even when you look at like the Leonard Taylor conversation and what he could potentially contribute in year two as a guy that maybe never ends up being even an adequate run stuffer, how much is the pass rush ability going to factor into how they look at some of these competitions? And if that is a little bit more of importance to them, then he could potentially even lose out to Leonard Taylor, and we end up just deciding to roll with Derek Nottie as a victor here. But ultimately, I put him down as a loser because we haven't really heard about any of the other defensive tackles not named Quinnen Williams and not named Byron Coward. And so if it's not for youth being on his side, I don't know that he's going to be a huge difference maker for us. A very nondescript type player, and really maybe your Solomon Thomas type replacement in terms of impact here for the New York Jets. So we'll see what happens, but based on really hearing nothing about him, it's been a ghost town in terms of news. I would say that we probably end up rolling with Derek Nottie. He brings the championship pedigree, and again, he's still getting the same job done as Jay Tufele while being able to offer a little bit more. So we'll see if things change here for him, but for now, he would be my loser of the offseason. Now, when we move to the edge spot, Will McDonald is my clear winner, and I really wanted to go with Rashad Weaver with some of the positive news coming out for him, but I'm going to stick to my bases here because Will McDonald isn't a undisputed star within his defense. He had the breakout year that you were definitely hoping for, and especially at a time where he wasn't even expected to have a significant role. If it wasn't for injuries, I don't know if you see this same level of play out of Will McDonald, or at least the stats that he was able to rack up. And people still feel like there's a lot more meat left on the bone. If you take out the run defense conversation, there were still plenty of quiet weeks where, yes, he was racking up pressures. Not that it was an overwhelming amount or anything crazy, but he still wasn't hitting home as you kind of expected to after having stretches of, multiple sack days and different things like that. So this is a guy that you feel like can grow further as a pass rusher, which is huge for, most people feel like if you hit the double-digit sack territory, you're starting to fall into that star conversation. And in Will McDonald's case, it seems like he's not getting that full treatment, but people are willing to acknowledge that he's coming on as one of the better rushers in the league. And the fact that he walked into this offseason completing the transformation that we expected last year, which would have been going into his sophomore year, where he's added on 15 pounds in 2025 to hold up better in the rush while still hopefully keeping that athleticism that should make him a dangerous rusher. It's huge for us, right? And I think there is going to be a lot more heavy reliance on Will McDonald right out of the gate because you do have Jermaine Johnson still rehabbing, still expected to be able to go full speed by week 1, but he's not going to have his Batman partner out there to hold down the fort and take things away from him. So we'll see what happens when teams are trying to slide coverage to him and try to erase him from a game and see if he can still have his presence met or felt. But at least over the course of OTAs and the minicamp so far, he's been a dominant force. I can't find a single reporter that's not willing to hype him up. And the fact that he's been able to beat out, Fashanu and Armand Mimbu as he's lined up across each side of the field is huge because Olu Fashanu did, acquiesce himself pretty well by the time the season was wrapping up, and we got a chance to hear John Simpson talk about how he's been acclimating in year 2. And Armand Mimbu, not known as a elite pass protector, although I think he only gave up 1 sack or less in 2024, but still, you talk about the physical archetype that he's bringing as a big body guy that can move but still has tremendous power. Great signs for him. Now, my loser in this category, I'm going to go with the rookie here, Tyler Barron, because he's coming in as a bit of a tweener. And even when you look at some of what draft analysts would have been saying about Tyler Barron, there are question marks. He had a very, very strong start to the season for Florida, but then things trailed off, and he was never known to be, this above average, superb run defender. So for one, he doesn't have a calling card. He doesn't have an ace up his sleeve in terms of his skill set you can rely on. He does have a couple of pass rush moves, which you feel good about, but kind of similar to Jermaine Johnson, or really just many rushers coming into the league in general. Doesn't understand how to set guys up or how to utilize them, and doesn't really transition well into his counters often. And so, much like Jay Tufele, it's been very quiet on Tyler Barron's front in terms of how he's adjusting. But you imagine that people are going, or at least that Aaron Glenn, Steve Wilkes, Eric Washington, they're going to try to see if he can fill that JFM / Michael Clemens role, where he'll bounce outside when it comes to pass rush opportunities, reduce inside when it comes to trying to help out in run defense, while still hopefully being able to take advantage of pass rush opportunities when they come. But he's not really built for that, and I think you've seen that learning lesson with Michael Clemens, for example. The added weight took away from the agility that he was able to use to take advantage of more so tight ends than tackles on the edge, and I imagine you're going to see the same problems with Tyler Barron, since it's not like he had an elite athletic score or, ridiculous combine as well. So we'll see what happens here. Ultimately, Tyler Barron could end up even succumbing to having to be placed on a practice squad, right? I think there's enough players in that defensive line room that's already done at least something in the league. Looking at, UDFAs from last year, for example, like McGregor and Watts, that at least have, some highlights or some decent talking points there. If you look deep enough to where you can say we don't have to throw Tyler Barron to the fire right away. So the staff's seen something in him, and maybe we need to wait for the pads to come on, for anything major to come out of this. But for now, a quiet offseason for a rookie can be a good thing, but in this event, we're going to chalk that up to being a negative, that you haven't at least heard about some splash plays or even, just a couple good moments that have been strung together here. Now, in the linebacker room, I think things are going to be fairly simple here, right? You have Sherwood, you have Quincy locking things up, and I'm going to roll with Jamie Sherwood just because you've heard some players hype him up. He's taking a leadership role. This staff felt good enough to give him an extension just based on the play that they've seen. And again, he's really only had 1 year of extended playing time here, but I like a lot of the stuff, not even from a playing standpoint with the OTAs or what we've heard there, but I love a lot of what I've heard from him as this guy that really kind of embraces the CJ mentality, where you're hearing him talk about, not only am I diving into the playbook for what I'm being asked to do and I'm going out there and I'm executing, but I'm looking at what the defensive line is being asked to do. I'm looking at the safeties and the cornerbacks behind me, because I don't want to just go out there and look to get guys in place. I want to understand how we're expected to maneuver and what we're looking to force the offense into, so that if I feel like we need to make changes, I have that ability out there, or I've earned that responsibility from the staff where I can effectively audible to a certain degree with the defense based on what I'm seeing. So this is a guy that should be able to go out there and put up another tremendous season. I think the calling card with him is definitely going to be not only the speed, but the play recognition, and then his ability in coverage from strong numbers that we've seen from last year. So he's done nothing to make this new staff feel like they've done a disservice by waiting to give him an extension, and that in and of itself is a huge win. Still feels highly motivated, and still seems like he's going to be a dog for us this year. So I'm super hyped for him. Now, for the loser in this category, again, we had to dig deep. I could have went with Francisco Mauigoa, aka Kiko, for us, which was another draft pick from this year, but I decided to go with Zaire Barnes because he got a chance to get groomed for a year by Robert Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich, Mike Rutenberg, and we've seen how well they've been able to get guys developed up. And this was a guy that did ball out in, I think he was coming out of the MEAC, right? But regardless, this was a guy that at least brought some of the traits. You like what you've seen out of spurts in the preseason for him. I think he ran into some health injuries, if I'm recalling correctly, as well, that took away from his ability to potentially make the roster. But he's looking at an uphill battle. You have 2 certified starters ahead of you. You have a draft pick ahead of you, which, they're always going to give, the I don't want to say effort, but they're going to give them some extended grace, if you will. And we don't know how many they're going to be willing to carry, right? I don't think we're going to be seeing too much 4-2-5 style defenses, but it still feels like we're really going to be walking out there with essentially two linebackers. We'll see how it plays out with having a base 4-3-3-4 front. Maybe that offers up some additional opportunity, but still, it's also been quiet on his front. I've actually heard more about guys like Marcelo McCrary-Ball having a decent offseason and some things to talk about. Again, Maui Goa being the draft pick. And you bring in some other guys that still, I feel like we still have Jackson Sermon. There's still a number of other guys that really can separate themselves from him as well here. So uphill battle. It feels like a guy that's going to ultimately end up being a roster cut for us. So we'll see what happens. Again, definitely time for things to change. But for now, similar trend with a lot of our losers here on this list. And then cornerback is where I'm really most excited about. My winner here is going to be Azareye'h Thomas, a third-round draft pick for us from this year, Florida State. And I'm really, really hyped. There's a lot of exciting news coming out about how well he's done during minicamp, during OTAs, and so much so that it feels like he could challenge Brandon Stephens for the starting role next to Sauce Gardner. And it doesn't sound crazy to say that that could be the case. Many people are still really going to look at him, and regardless of how well he's done, regardless of how well he may continue to do in training camp, the biggest question mark will be what happens when you get beat. You don't have the speed, and this may just be a guy that just brings, I don't want to say perfect technique, but he brings enough consistency in terms of his press coverage, his jamming techniques, and then his ability to just erase the short to intermediate routes, that it might not be a huge factor, right? A lot of what you'll hear people talk about is you could really put him in an advantageous position and kind of hide some of those weaknesses from an athleticism standpoint by just shading a safety over to help him out. And if you have Sauce Gardner traveling, or you really just trust him holding down his side of the fort, that becomes a lot less of a problem, that you're taking a body away from being able to step up, from shorter depth in coverage or run defense. So the needle's pointing extremely high from Azareye'h, and I would say that out of the entire rookie class, including Mimbu, he may have been the biggest winner out of the rookie class so far. So we'll see what happens with him, but a very, very excited about what's been coming out of the offseason so far for him. And then my loser is going to be Jarek Bernard-Converse. I struggle with this one because there's a number of guys you could look at. I also wanted to consider Quantez Stiggers for this list, but JBC is a guy that could get lost in the shuffle. For one, he has the safety background, so depending on how that competition is going, maybe the staff decides they want to take a look at him there again, which would actually help him out potentially, in my opinion. But if Azareye'h Thomas is already getting a lot of credibility, and he's essentially, you could look at JBC as a more athletic version of what Azareye'h would be, although less technically refined in terms of the man coverage techniques and stuff. He's already kind of being ousted, right? And then you look at the depth chart, you have Sauce probably going to get a historical contract here pretty soon. You have Brandon Stephens, big money free agent, and he's not even guaranteed, as we just talked about, locking in the spot as the number 2 cornerback. You have MC2, who's going to lock up the slot spot. And then you start talking about, well, what do we have after that? Azareye'h Thomas, rookie. Then you get into JBC. You get into Quantez Stiggers. You get into Isaiah Oliver, potentially moonlighting more as a cornerback than a safety. So it's another situation where so a lot of these guys would have needed to at least ball out for some level of significant play over the course of minicamp so far, just so that the name stays at the top of the mind for these coaches when they're going back and looking at how they want to set things up. But I wouldn't be surprised if you're talking about seeing him as a third or fourth stringer on the first initial depth chart that gets tossed out here by Aaron Glenn once training camp gets kicked off. And then at the safety position, I think things are pretty, the pretty run-of-the-mill, staying the course here. Andre Sisco, I think, would be the biggest winner. People talked about the physicality. They've talked about the ball hawking ability, and he's gotten his hands on a couple of balls that he's been able to either run back for pick sixes or just in general forcing the turnovers. So you love that you're seeing it early. You're seeing it often. Especially at a time where you expect the deep and intermediate ability for us to attack those areas of the field to get a little bit better. But he's bringing the veteran ability. He kind of personifies a lot of those New York attributes. I feel like that Aaron Glenn really likes as well. So this is just kind of a free agent that perfectly fit the profile that I think this team would be looking for, and he's at least making good on a lot of the plays that you expect him to make once the games start mattering pretty early here. So again, another one of those situations where you could look at the contract and say, don't necessarily love it, especially with him coming off, quote unquote down year. But I think this is a guy that you end up riding with, and you're going to see some positive returns come from him, and he's going to be able to help mentor up some of these guys like Tony Adams as well that are going to be behind him. So we'll see what happens. And then Jarius Monroe, UDFA from last year, I think he ends up just being another guy that ends up falling down the pecking order here. You're bringing in guys like Dean Clark that are coming in ahead of him, as well as someone potentially like Jordan Clark, who could switch from cornerback to safety due to some athleticism issues. So there's some name value ahead of him. There's also some guys that are just bringing some veteran-like experience. In Dean Clark's case, for example, after playing 6 years in college. So we'll see. I like Jarius Monroe. He was actually one of the leaders in the preseason just in terms of performance and PFF grades and all that kind of stuff. So it was really good to see him have some early success. But he could be another guy that we end up passing on just in favor of guys that end up fitting what we want to do better. But I'm hoping that we at least get a good enough look out of someone like Jarius Monroe, because the safety position is one that's at least up for some easier battles at both of the backup spots, assuming we carry 4. So we'll see what happens. But let me know what you guys think about my biggest winners and losers list. Is there someone that we should be seriously considering more that wasn't on here? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.